The Department of International Relations and Cooperation says it is lamentable that Mauritius has joined the chorus to ban travel from South Africa. Detection of the Omicron variant has led to mostly Western nations, including the UK and the US, closing borders with the Southern African countries. For more on this, I'm joined now by the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, who joins us from Abuja in Nigeria. Minister, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just want to start with this. In the President's address yesterday, he mentioned that the travel bans were a clear and completely unjustifiable departure from the commitment that many of these countries, talking about Western countries, made with African countries at the G20 meeting in Rome. What agreements were those, and do they still carry any weight after this? Sorry, Minister, you are muted. We cannot hear you. We can, if you don't mind, just unmuting yourself. There we go.
My apology.
No problem.
My apology. No, we hope that countries will honor the agreements that had been discussed at the G20, which included that the most urgent matter for all of us to address is to ensure that those who don't have access to vaccine doses will be given such access by countries that have an excess, an oversupply of vaccine doses and are hoarding them. The second was that urgent for the global community is the recovery of our economies. And tourism is an important part of many of our economic sectors. So we are really horrified at the irrational manner in which so many countries have reacted. And we are very astounded because there have been announcements of variants from other parts of the world, and those countries were not banned in the way that South African travelers have suddenly been banned. So we are absolutely shocked and dismayed at these lamentable decisions.
Minister, bringing it back home to Africa, some of the African countries have also, issued travel bans against South Africa and other Southern African countries. And some of those countries that have done so, South Africa has actually donated vaccines, substantial amounts of vaccines as well. I mean, what's your take on this reaction from certain African countries?
I think what we're seeing really is an irrationality which indicates that we are not listening to the WHO and we are not adopting practices that will allow us to combat COVID-19. No country can combat it by banning other people, because that is ridiculous. We only know that a person is positive when we've tested them. So you can't assume a whole nation is positive infected by the virus. This is how we're being treated. It's really quite shocking and absolutely irrational and unscientific. And I hope in particular that African countries will realize that we need to stand together. Of course, we must protect our populations, but our reaction must be based on good science, must be based on the fact that we are able to test, that we are vaccinating on the continent, although it's still limited in many countries. But we were, for example, in Rwanda recently. They were able to do the instant test and to have the PCR test. So I cannot understand why suddenly they would feel that they cannot implement those clinical measures which have been recommended by the World Health Organization, and they suddenly ban all 55 million South Africans from traveling on their airline. This is inexplicable and should really be reversed as soon as possible.
Minister, is geopolitics at play here, and have you started engaging with some of the African leaders that have placed these bans on us?
Well, the fact that this is done to Africans and to developing countries, primarily by developed countries, suggests that there are geopolitics at play. Politicians are trying to illustrate to their populations that they're taking measures to protect them. We know, for example, that countries that have more than 40,000 infections a day, such as the United Kingdom, have suddenly banned us because we have a new variant and just over 3,000 infections on some days and not every day. So the reactions actually don't suggest understanding of policy and commitment to what we've discussed in the international stage, as well as agreement as to how we should act in a rational, reasonable manner so that we don't have instances where we create prejudice and discrimination against particular countries or particular races or people.
If I may go back to that question of engagement at the present moment, have we started engaging these countries, and what's the reaction been, if we have?
Well, we certainly have. As you know, our president has had a discussion with his colleague, Prime Minister Johnson, who has sought to assure South Africa that this decision is taken on the advice of their scientists, and that they would hope that the ban on travel for South Africans to the United Kingdom will be lifted as soon as possible, and that they would, along with government and our scientists, monitor the situation and lift the ban. We still believe, even in the face of these assurances, that the decision that has been taken is unwarranted and really cannot be supported by logic and science. I've also had interaction with my counterpart in the United Kingdom and expressed the same sentiments. She also repeated that they hope that this will be lifted very soon, but it is a peculiar reaction because the best way to protect each other are clinical measures, not banning travel. We're just further harming our economies and causing a further retreat with respect to the recovery we've begun to see in the tourism sector, we've begun to see in the travel sector. Suddenly, we just wipe out the progress in an instance when we have the ability to cope with testing, with identifying those who are affected, and with quarantining and isolating those that would have tested positive. We have the ability to do these things. We've developed it over time. There was no need for travel bans.
Minister, you're currently speaking to us from Abuja in Nigeria. You're on a 4-nation tour at the moment, promoting intra-Africa trade. Please speak to us about your engagement so far with your Nigerian counterparts and other authorities.
Well, these are very important visits that have been agreed to by President Ramaphosa. He will pay state visits to 4 countries in the region. We've begun with Nigeria. We've had excellent exchanges. We had a full binational commission of ministers today, which was preceded by 4 days of meetings between our officials, looking at a range of matters. Key among them is, of course, to advance economic growth and to support the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area and provide support to the African Union in the implementation of Agenda 2063. The discussions have been lively. They've been very focused. We are very outcomes-oriented. And I'm thrilled at the decisions that have been made and which we will communicate to the heads of state tomorrow.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry, Minister, I just want to go back to, just so quickly, just back to the travel ban issue. Just something that we've just picked up now from the U.S. President Joe Biden earlier on. He was speaking, saying that South Africa doesn't need any more vaccines. They're having trouble getting it out into people's arms as well. The White House press secretary claiming South Africa has turned down offers of vaccines from the United States. What's your take take on, this coming out of the United States saying, listen, we can't get those vaccines into people's arms, so they don't need any more vaccines? Is that a responsible thing to say from a head of state?
I suspect they're trying to change the subject because they've irrationally banned travel by South Africans. So now the victim suddenly is found to be at fault. I think it's a wrong premise to utilize. It's true that we do have sufficient vaccines. We've never hidden this, but we have called for all of Africa and the developing world to have access to doses. We're not only interested in South Africa, we are interested in the entire continent because we truly believe that we are all safe when we are only safe when all of us are safe, and that vaccines should be a public good. The developed world has not held up to the promise of public good with respect to vaccines. They've been hoarding. There are now booster shots underway when many countries on the African continent do not have sufficient doses. So to speak of South Africa really is just hiding away from the inadequacy of international commitment to ensuring that every person should have access to vaccines. This is the subject that the President of the United States and other leaders should be focusing upon. How do we make sure that everyone is safe? He's not talking about the science. I think they're realizing that there was an overreaction and now suddenly focusing on the vaccine program in South Africa. We've done well. Over 50% of persons over 60 are fully vaccinated. This is excellent. We'd like to lift that number up far higher for persons between 50 and 60. We want to vaccinate many more, and we call on all South Africans to come forward because being vaccinated will provide greater protection against many of the variants that have already been identified. So we would ask President Biden to lift the ban against South Africa and to ensure that all those who need access to vaccines gain that access from the most powerful countries in the world, and that banning us doesn't answer the need that exists to combat this virus.
And lastly, Minister, do you think other countries might be looking at the way South Africa has been punished, or Southern Africa, as a whole, by being transparent, with this new strain? And they might be looking at this and saying, if we were to find a new variant in our country, we might as well not tell anybody, just keep quiet.
Well, this is, I think, a looming problem. One of the positive aspects of the way we've all worked together to combat and address the effects of COVID-19 has been the global collaboration ensued once the pandemic was discovered. So the virus was identified and became a global pandemic. I think that we must not lose the value of that global collaboration, because as I've said, we have to make progress together to defeat it. So really punishing us for having brilliant scientists in South Africa, Botswana, and elsewhere who did excellent work is really not upholding what should be the best modern practices of open science and transparency. And we are truly dismayed that our scientists who've been open and honest are treated in such a troubling fashion.
Minister, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here. You're in Abuja in Nigeria, and good luck with the rest of your four-nation tour there in West Africa. That's the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, speaking to us about the travel bans imposed on South Africa and other Southern African countries.